Hey there everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host Prickly Hedgehog. Thanks for tuning in for another video. Something a little different today. We're going to talk about labels, and is it cheating to use the labels in DCS World? One of the challenges in DCS World is visual acuity, especially in reference to locating and keeping track of enemy aircraft within visual range. Remember, there are two broad terms we use when referencing the location of enemy aircraft. BVR is one, which stands for beyond visual range, and the other is WVR, which stands for within visual range. We are going to be focusing on the latter term in this video, as you can probably imagine. We've all seen fantastic aerial combat by some pretty experienced sim pilots out there on YouTube, who seem to be able to spot enemy aircraft at will. They then enter into a beautiful BFM ballet and shoot down the enemy aircraft, like Captain Flashheart from Blackadder. They're home in time for kippers. Woof. The reality for most of us, however, is that BFM is a panic exercise. While you frantically scan the skies for the enemy, lose situational awareness, and sometimes even lose control of your aircraft in the process of trying to find the enemy. Thus, the whole experience is both frustrating and annoying. One remedy is to turn on labels to assist you in keeping track of enemy aircraft. And indeed, you can even use it to keep track, obviously, of friendly aircraft who have disappeared out of sight that you were hoping to keep in formation with, say after takeoff or some sort of maneuver. You can't fight what you can't see, so turning on the labels is going to help. But the question is it cheating? Well, the vague answer is not necessarily. Obviously, if you're in a multiplayer server which prohibits the use of labels or even the dot markers, then of course, yeah, that would be cheating. But many of us play the solo game, such as in the new campaigns, and therefore we're largely playing against ourselves and the AI aircraft. It is important to remember that many real-world pilots too have mentioned that it is much harder to see things in the game than in real life. This is largely to do with depth perception and clarity of the human eye over the 3D screen. Indeed, one real pilot I heard described that it was extremely realistic at about a mile out visually, but after that, not so much. So if you're finding it challenging to see things and gather and gain visual acuity, then you're not alone. The question is why? Well, we kind of mentioned it. We need to remind ourselves that while DCS World is a fantastic simulator and models many aspects of aerial combat extremely well, there are some limitations of mimicking a 3D world through a 2D screen. These limitations are further complicated by the resolution of the screen you're viewing the 3D world through, the hardware used to generate those images, and the way in which ED's software interacts with your particular hardware. Users are therefore going to have different experiences across the various platforms. The only long-term solution will likely be VR headsets, but they're still relatively new in their development, and they can be an expensive solution, especially if your hardware is unable to run them properly, requiring you to update your PC, which can again be an expensive solution. I want to clarify here too that this is not specifically an issue with ED's product. Rather, as stated, it's the physical issue of interacting through a 2D screen to peer into a 3D environment. Furthermore, there are restrictions to how much I can move my head around, the way in which the AI is able to see its opponent, the flight characteristics of enemy aircraft and AI behavior when encountering opponents, receiving damage, and so on and so forth. Some of these factors are actually being addressed and worked on by Ego Dynamics. In other words, a human opponent is likely going to give you a better reflection of your BFM abilities, because they will also suffer from similar issues you have regarding visual acuity in the 3D experience that the AI doesn't necessarily have, unless of course the human opponent is using VR headsets, and then of course they may have a slight advantage. In the real world, pilots have to be very good at generating a mental picture in 3 dimensions of the battlefield. Fighter pilots have this forte well tuned, but of course it varies between individuals and even between very good fighter pilots. Some have an innate ability in this area, some are able to train it. If you're struggling to master this, especially if you're new to the game, then there is nothing wrong with using the labels to assist your brain manage that 3D world, especially if it improves your simming experience. Remember too that while aerial combat and BFM ACM engagements look cool, this is not the only function of some aircraft, and not all of them excel at this. Good pilots recognize the limitations of their aircraft, and this is why we have air superiority fighters on station overhead to protect bombers or ground-pounding operations from prowling interceptors or fighters. As CW Lemoyne once quipped, bombers win wars, BFM makes movies. So don't kick yourself too hard if you're struggling with this skill. Like air-to-air refueling, it's not easy in real life, and it's especially challenging in the game because of the reasons that we've described. Use the labels if it helps, and then perhaps after time, you may find you don't need them quite so much, or dispense with them altogether. Let me know what your experiences are with the game, with or without labels, and why you use them or don't use them. In the interim, thanks for watching. This is Prickly Hedgehog out, and of course we'll see you next time. Stay safe, everybody.